On behalf of the Center for Law and Liberty at HBU, welcome to the beautiful Beeland Chapel on our campus. I'm Dr. Christopher Hammonds, the Dean of the School of Humanities, and I'm also a professor of government here. And I know that many of you hear horror stories about college professors and some of the nonsense that they teach to their students, but I want to assure you that not all of us are crazy. There are some of us, like the faculty here at HBU, who believe in ideas like liberty, limited government, and the rule of law, who appreciate the wisdom of the Founding Fathers, and who defend in our classrooms the principles that make this country great. And I can tell you from firsthand experience in my own classes and some of the students that are here tonight, students at HBU actually read the Constitution. HBU has a long tradition of hosting on our campus distinguished statesmen and political thinkers who share our values, including President Ronald Reagan, Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher, President H.W. Bush, President George W. Bush, Governor Rick Perry, Senator Rick Santorum, Karl Rove, and most recently, Dr. Charles Krauthammer. And so we've decided to build on this long tradition through the creation of our Center for Law and Liberty, which will promote our nation's founding principles to not only our students, but also to area educators and businessmen, and to our state and local leaders. We believe so strongly in this mission that we plan to build on our campus a replica of Independence Hall, so students can take classes in the very room where the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution were drafted. And the building will be an outward and visible symbol that here at HBU, we honor the wisdom of the Founding Fathers and will pass it on to the next generation of leaders. So we are delighted to have you here tonight at the first of what I hope is many events, and I hope you will return for many more. Before we begin tonight, I'd like to recognize a special guest in our audience. We're honored to have with us Lieutenant Governor David Dewhurst and his wife Tricia here. Lieutenant Governor, if you want to stand. Thank you for being here, and you're always welcome on our campus. At this time, I'd like to introduce to you the president of HBU, a man of great faith and vision who also shares our love of country, Dr. Robert Sloan.
Chris Hammonds, Dean Hammonds, thank you so much. What a gracious introduction. I appreciate it. And again, welcome to so many. We have so many celebrities here tonight. It's kind of hard to recognize all of you, but again, we want to say welcome not only to the Congressman, but Governor Dewhurst. Thank you. It's so good to see you and others. We have judges here and others that we are so glad to have in our midst. Welcome to the campus of HBU. It's my privilege. I really have the easiest job here tonight, and that's simply to welcome you to the campus. It's a beautiful day. I hope you've had a little opportunity already, but if not, perhaps even this evening, if it's along the paths that are well lit, and there are many of them, we hope you'll take the opportunity to look at the campus. But come back on another occasion. We're working hard to be a very strong Christian university. We think that faith and convictions, these kinds of things are not a zero-sum game with academics. There has been a terrible lesson learned in our culture, or people think they have learned that if you increase faith, you somehow have to back off of intellectual and academic rigor, and that is not the case. We think that a vigorous faith demands a willingness to ask questions, to seek the truth, and to have the disciplines that lead to an ordered life, a moral life, and of course, in an exceptional country like ours, the kind of life that makes great citizens. So Chris Hammonds, thank you so much for your leadership of the Center for Law and Liberty. As I only partially with a smile said to the Congressman tonight, here at HBU, we actually believe in law and liberty when we say it. And so welcome. We're really glad to have you on this campus. There are a number of faculty of the university who are here and staff. I hope you'll have the opportunity to meet some of them this evening as well, and welcome to our students. So it's my privilege. Well, Chris, you'll call on the next person, but thanks so much for being here.
Thank you, Dr. Sloan. Ladies and gentlemen, faculty and students, for our program tonight, you received in the lobby 2 cards. One is a card you can return to us if you want to help us in our mission. The other card is a card for you to write a question on for our guest. And our ushers will collect the cards at the end of the Congressman's presentation, so be listening carefully, think of a good question and write it down, and then maybe I will choose your question for the question and answer session. You'll see the ushers collecting them later in the program. We will open with a prayer led by Dr. John Tyler, Professor of Law, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance to the United States and Texas flag. So please stand for prayer and the pledge.
Thank you, Dean. Let us pray. Father, we thank you for the great gift of liberty that we have to practice our religious faith in freedom. We thank you for the gift of your Son that makes our salvation possible. We also thank you for godly and inspiring leaders, such as Congressman Poe, who stand up to protect our rights and our liberties of religious freedom, and who also bravely stands forth to protect the right to life of those among us who are least able to protect themselves. We also thank you for our students, for our administration, and for this wonderful institution where learning is enhanced by the truth that you've given us. We ask these things in Christ's name. Amen.
You please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance to the American flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all, and to the Texas flag as well. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, one state under God, one and indivisible. Thank you. You may be seated. It's my pleasure to introduce our guest tonight. Our guest tonight was elected to the U.S. House of Representatives in 2004 and represents the 2nd Congressional District of Texas. He is one of the leading advocates in Washington for limited government, free markets, and liberty. Prior to serving in Congress, our guest served in the United States Air Force Reserves, taught high school and college classes, and earned a law degree from the University of Houston. Soon after graduation, he accepted a position as a prosecutor in Houston, Texas. And during his 8 years of service with the Harris County District Attorney's Office, he became the chief felony prosecutor and never lost a jury trial. He later became one of the youngest judges ever appointed in Texas and garnered national media attention for his creative sentencing for criminals and hard-nosed approach to enforcing the law. As a member of Congress, he serves on the House Judiciary Committee, the House Foreign Affairs Committee, and as chairman of the Subcommittee on Terrorism, Non-Proliferation, and Trade. We're glad to have him here at HBU tonight, and I should point out that we have a couple of his classmates here in our audience, one in particular, Dr. Diana Severance, the director of our Bible Museum, who tells me that when they were classmates together in American history in high school, even then, the future congressman was arguing against the New Deal and the Federal Reserve. So, please help me welcome Congressman Ted Poe.
Thank you, Dr. Hammonds. I appreciate that introduction, or most of it anyway. It's an honor to be here. Dr. Sloan, university academic professors, thank you for what you do. Governor Dewhurst, thanks for what you do for the state of Texas. We appreciate your service. My favorite person who exercises the First Amendment probably better than anybody is sitting here as well, Sam Malone. And thank you for what you do for liberty and justice as well, Sam. Thank you very much. I appreciate the prayer and I appreciate the pledge. This may shock a lot of folks, but if you go to Washington, D.C., and you're in the Capitol, you will see a lot of tradition and symbols of our tradition. When Benjamin Franklin, the oldest person present when the Constitution was written, before they wrote the Constitution, he made the comment that if the good Lord is concerned about a sparrow that falls from the tree, he would certainly be concerned about the birth of a new nation, and suggested that those founders kneel in prayer before they wrote the Constitution. And they did. And every day before they would go back to that hard work of writing that document, they would pray that they had guidance from the Almighty. And we carry on that tradition in the House of Representatives. Every day we start out the same way. There's a prayer, and then there's a pledge to the American flag. Now, we haven't added the Texas flag yet, but we're working on that for those of us from Texas.
And you've all seen the speaker stand where the speaker is during the State of the Union. The president is below the speaker, but there's American flag there. You see that. And above the flag, which you'll never see on television, is the national motto, "In God We Trust." It's higher than the flag. God first, country second. Prayer, God first, country second. Traditions that we still use to this day. They go all the way back to our founders. Excellent traditions. And we should never forget that in God we do trust. Several years ago, when there was the Iron Curtain and there was communism. It's a word that we really don't want to use too much today, but there was communism, there's communism today, and half the world was in slavery, political slavery. And after that wall came down, the Iron Curtain came down, we learned about people who lived under communism and what happened to them by that totalitarian philosophy of stateism. And there's a story of a young Czechoslovakian student who went to Prague University. And under communism, under certain governments, certain documents were forbidden. You could not own one, and you certainly couldn't read one publicly. One of those, of course, in some countries, was the Bible. But there were others as well. And he knew this, but yet he went to the steps of Prague University and stood on the steps, and he read from a forbidden document that he knew was forbidden. And he was later arrested, and he went to prison for 5 years. And he was released when the wall came down. Young Czechoslovakian student. Well, what did he read? Well, it went something like this. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. They are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. That among those are life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness. And that governments are instituted among men to secure those rights. The Declaration of Independence. And because he read Thomas Jefferson's Declaration of Independence, they carted him off to jail. You see, people have looked to this nation from all over the world because of our type of philosophy regarding liberty. And Thomas Jefferson's Declaration of Independence, Declaration of Independence was the justification why we had the moral right and legal right to separate from King George III. He established the moral right, the legal right in the Declaration of Independence. Read all the accusations against King George. Those are pretty tough. King George, he stayed awake at night reading that stuff. But he changed the philosophy in history about government and people. Because always before our founders, except for maybe the Greeks for a period of time, government was always in charge. And the emperor, the king, the queen, the chief, the dictator, whatever you call the top person, was in total control of the people. Even in England, if you remember English history, I think they still teach that, the king owned all the land. You couldn't own the land. Private property, you couldn't own it because it belonged to the king. Well, Jefferson's philosophy and our founders' philosophy was not so fast. It's backwards. The king should not be in charge. The people should be in charge. And he flipped that idea. And he said that because we are endowed by our Creator with rights, that government works for us. We don't work for government. Now, I spoke at 2 high schools yesterday. And I happened to speak at Baylor this morning. That was quite a drive from Houston to Baylor, back here tonight. And I asked this question when I go to some of our schools. Where do your rights come from? And finally they'll start talking, and most kids will say, government, Constitution. Well, the Constitution doesn't give you rights, it just names a few of them. But very seldom will they ever, and I carry a pocket Constitution around with me, and I pass it out. John is here. We were at schools yesterday. We pass them out. It's an open book test. The answer's in the book. Look it up. And they'll finally look, and somebody will say, God? Do we get those rights from God? Yes, you do. Because we believe that your rights come from God, then government comes from the people, not the other way around. And that's a basic premise of our philosophy in this country, even democracies today in the world. That's not their philosophy. So that important truism that we get rights from a creator then gives us power over government. And a lot of times, people will talk about this, about the relationship between the people and the government. Oh, the government's in charge. The government tells us what to do. It's supposed to be the other way around. We're supposed to control government. Like Jefferson said, that governments are instituted among men to secure those rights. So, they come along to the Constitution. They write the Constitution. Patrick Henry, who was my favorite of all of the founders, refused to sign the Constitution. He wasn't going to sign it because there were no Bill of Rights in it. And he hauls off back to Virginia and goes to his farm, and he was mad because there were no Bill of Rights. And so they finally decided we better pass some amendments, Bill of Rights. And you read the Bill of Rights, they're all the same. They limit government. Congress shall make no law. Congress shall make no law. They're pretty easy to read and understand. And so the First Amendment is first, and it wasn't just an accident. They didn't say, hey, let's vote on what should be first. Pick one. It wasn't that way. The first one was first because it was the most important one. And the first protection in the Bill of Rights deals with religion, prohibiting government from establishing a state religion. It doesn't prohibit government from telling the people that they can't talk about God. See, it's a state religion. But it also says it gives people the right to free exercise of their religion. Now notice the phrase. It doesn't say government shall make no law infringing on the belief of religion or religious beliefs. It doesn't say that. It says government shall make no law infringing on the free exercise of religion. You not only have the right to believe whatever you want to believe religiously, but you have the right to practice it, exercise it. And government cannot get in the way of your free exercise of your religious beliefs. Does it? Yes, it does. Government doesn't follow that first phrase. That's the most important one because it's first. But then, speech, press, assembly, and the right to petition government for redress. Those are all in the First Amendment because if you don't have those, the rest of them are meaningless. Now, in our ancestors' day, the most controversial, the most contentious, the most infuriating type of conversation dealt with two subjects: politics and religion. That's what they talked about. We hear you've been told at the dinner table, don't talk about religion and don't talk politics. And my grandmother, who was the most influential person in my life, taught me those are the two things you do talk about at dinner, or supper as we call it in Texas. It's politics and religion. My grandmother was the most influential person, like I said, in my life. She lived to 99 years of age, more important than my parents even, who are both 88 now and live over in Katy. She never, however, she thought she failed, even on her deathbed. She said she failed because she couldn't forgive me for being a Republican. She was one of those yellow dog Democrats and proud of it, He even said one time, I'm not sure you can go to heaven being a Republican. She meant it too. But anyway, that's beside the point. So politics, political speech, criticizing government like Sam does once or twice a day, criticizing the government are talking about religion and the free exercise of religion. That was the most controversial in our ancestors' days, our forefathers. It's the most controversial now. And government can't stop that type of speech. You notice, speech comes right after religion. Religion, speech, press, assembly, the right to petition government. And then they slipped that Second Amendment in there to make sure that the people had the right to protect the First Amendment. We don't have time to go into the Second Amendment, but I believe in the Second Amendment. A kid yesterday asked me, well, Congressman Poe, what do you think about gun control? And I said, I think the best type of gun control is a steady hand. But anyway, sorry to get off the subject. I know we have a limited time. Dr. Sloan, you're not going to make me leave yet, are you? So, in Congress, it's our obligation, because we represent the people, to make sure that we carry out the will of the people in passing legislation. Congress is talked about first in the Constitution. Why? Because our forefathers intended for the legislative body to be the most important. And they talk about the president second and the judiciary third. As a practical matter, it's backwards. The judiciary is the most powerful, then the president, and then Congress. And I'm not going to get into making political comments here, but the Congress is the weakest branch of government. You can see that it's the weakest branch, and it's never supposed to be, because we represent the will of the people. And therefore, we're all elected. We represent the people. We pass that legislation. When I went to law school, and some of you know where I went to law school, and I've heard this from other people, I went all the way through law school and never got an answer to that question that I just asked y'all, those students yesterday. Where do your rights come from? I never got an answer to that. I never looked in the Declaration of Independence for that answer. And that's where it is. So, some of the things that are of great concern, I think, about liberty. You know, that's not just a word to throw around. We talk about freedom and liberty, freedom and liberty. The country is great. This country is great because we believe in that liberty that we're given. And it's political liberty. It's economic liberty as well. And if you think about it, why the country is great is because we have economic freedom and political freedom, as well as religious freedom. Those three things. You know, we got people from all over the world trying to get to the United States. They do. They're coming every way they can get here. They risk their lives, the families' lives. They're coming. Why are they coming? Why are they coming? They're coming for liberty. Political liberty, religious liberty, or economic liberty. They're not coming here for more government programs or government control of their lives. That's why they're coming to this country. So, and it's based upon our foundation and our belief. Now, some of the things that are happening are of great concern to me. We hear about the NSA, the National Spy Agency, as I've sometimes called that. I think they're in violation of the Fourth Amendment when they seize records that don't belong to them without a warrant. I don't care what the reason. You know, it's always the reason. We hear this from members of Congress. Well, we've got to do this because of national security. We've got to be safe from those criminals, those outlaws, those terrorists. So we seize this information. Franklin said something to the effect, and some of y'all can correct me on the correct quote, that people who give up liberty in the name of security will have neither, or deserve neither. It's one of those. And he was right. We can have liberty and we can have security. And don't ever buy off on that argument, well, I got to give up my personal liberty. Historically, in the history of peoples of the world, government has always tried to sell that to the people. Give up some of your personal liberty, we'll make you safer. Every kind of government has done that over the history of the world. And people do. They have a tendency, okay, I'll be safe, I'll give up some of my liberty. We can have both. Very concerned about the NSA and the spying techniques that are taking place. That Fourth Amendment, that's a good one, you know. I used to be a judge for a long time, 22 years here in Houston. Heard about 25,000 felony cases, everything from stealing to killing, everything in between. And there not a day passed where I didn't have some police officer come to me and say, Judge Poe, would you look at this warrant and see if it states enough probable cause under the Fourth Amendment to go out and search this house? And I would look at it, and if it did, I would sign it. He would swear to it, or she would swear to it. If it wasn't probable cause, sorry, you don't state probable cause. You can't go into that house. And police officers still abide by that rule of the Fourth Amendment. Get a warrant. That's the rule. Get a warrant. There are exceptions, sure, but get a warrant. Congress needs to weigh in on this and change what has taken place with the right of privacy, to be secure in our houses and our effects from unlawful searches and seizures by government seizure, NSA records. We've heard about drones. You know, there are drones, and internationally we use drones. Forget about that issue. Don't have time to talk about it. Domestic drones, use of drones, flying overhead. There's a lot of reasons why people want to use drones. When it comes to law enforcement, the general rule ought to be get a warrant. Because people need to be secure in their houses and their papers and their effects. We're working on that legislation, bipartisan, by the way. And those are a couple of issues. And then there's another one, emails. Now, I am not super tech when it comes to anything that deals with computers. That's why I have Jonna work for me over here. I'm still last century when it comes to all that stuff. But under our law, just think about this now. Under our law, you have an email, and you store it in the cloud. If it's over 6 months old, our government can seize those emails without a warrant, without telling you. That concerns me. I think the Fourth Amendment ought to apply to that. And we're working on bipartisan legislation to get that changed. So those are some of the things about liberty that are being threatened in our country. We don't have time for religious conversation about religious liberty, but it's under attack everywhere, many places in this country. And it's been, in my opinion, a misinterpretation of the First Amendment. Go back and read what it says. And it's been expanded and changed a great deal. So those are some concerns that I see about liberty and the law. The Constitution sets a good foundation. We ought to follow it. We ought to, as y'all do here at the school, we ought to read it. It's in the book, you know. It's an open book test. And it gives us great answers. Lastly, I would just like to make one other comment, and then we'll get some questions. Are we time for questions now? Okay, well, it's a long comment. All of us have people that we hold in high esteem that helped us down the path, you know. My grandmother was one. Rex Fleming, debate coach at Memorial High School, was another. But my favorite person in all of history was William Barrett Travis. He was a 27-year-old lawyer, South Carolina, Alabama, and then he found himself in February of 1836 at a beat-up old Spanish church down the road from here called the Alamo. He was the commander of the Alamo. And he was there along with all volunteers. Just like our Army and our Navy and our Marines, they're all volunteers. None of them are forced to be in the military. Greatest military that's ever existed, represents the United States of America. I've been to Iraq. I've been to Afghanistan. I have seen those men and women. Ooh, the Talibanis getting real nervous when they hear the Marines coming. And anyway, he was my favorite person in history. And one reason was because he was fighting for liberty. You know, in Texas, we have two historical events that make us who we are. There's the American War of Independence, and there's the Texas War of Independence. Ancestors in both of those wars of independence, people gave up their lives for that word liberty and freedom. They just did, and they still do it. But he wrote a letter at the Alamo, February the 24th, 1836, and it said something to the effect, to all Americans in the world, I am besieged by 1,000 or more of the enemy under the command of Santa Anna. They will soon receive reinforcements daily. The enemy has demanded surrender at its discretion. Otherwise, this fort will be put to the sword. I have answered that demand with a cannon shot. The flag still waves proudly over the wall. I shall never surrender or retreat. And I call upon you in the name of liberty and everything dear to our character to come to my aid with all dispatch. But if this call is neglected, I am determined to do my best to serve my country and do what is to my honor and do my duty. Victory or death. God in Texas. William Barrett Travis, Colonel, the Alamo. February 24th, then on March the 6th, he and all of the other volunteers were killed for that word, liberty and freedom. So we have a glorious past. People are worth fighting for that. And we should not give it up or let anybody take our religious liberty, our political liberty, and our economic liberty away from us. Because we didn't get that from government. We got that from the Almighty. Thank you very much.